Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another review of The Bad Batch. Today, we are taking a look at Season 2, Episode 4, Faster. So, this is the first one of those where I feel like I haven't really looked at too many online reactions, but I feel like this is going to be kind of the first of where you get the crowd coming out going, this episode was just filler. Nothing happened. It's just filler. And I always dislike when they come out, because obviously this was kind of like a little fun pod racing side adventure. But after this episode, it's clear they're going to delve more into Sid's past and are building her up, and maybe going to try to trick the audience into thinking that maybe she could betray the Bad Batch. I don't know. I don't know about that, because I feel like she's kind of warmed up. She's not as chilly with them as she was in like her early episodes in season 1. At this point, she's still very stern with them. And it's like, hey, go do this, go do that. Come with me, come on. She's still calling them like Muscles and Goggles and isn't bothering to call them by their actual names. But she's definitely warmed up to them a lot. So I don't know about this idea of her actively betraying them. I feel like, and this is one of those, it's like, well, this could be predictable, which is what I was kind of talking about in those episodes for the review for the first 2 episodes, where I was like, really, come on, you're better than this. You don't have to go down this predictable route. But I could kind of maybe see her in a moment of panic betraying them, and then feeling remorseful, and then coming back to rescue them, or something, like something along those lines. I could see that happening, maybe, but it's like one of those, like, well, it's so predictable. So I don't know if that's exactly what's going to happen. But a lot of interesting stuff going on in this episode. New planet that we haven't seen before. Again, it's like it's not pod racing, it's something else racing. But this actually, just based on the visuals, this actually feels more like this should be called pod racing than what we saw in Phantom Menace. Because these were actually very, very small little speeders that were like a small pod. Although I understand where they're coming from with the name Pod Racer for the race in episode 1, because of where they actually sat, and it was really usually the engines that were quite large. So, but these were such small little vehicles that it's like, wow, these really are pods. Maybe this should have been this pod race. But it was really fun to see this race and all the different things. It felt very Speed Racer-ish, which given the Filoni's background and stuff, is I'm sure when they're in the story meetings for this season, like he had his marker on the whiteboard and he went Speed Racer episode, and and circled it, and he pointed to it, and they kind of looked at him, and he looked at them, and they looked at him, and he looked at them, and he's like, what? It's like, can we not have a racing episode? They're like, no, that's fine. It's like, do you care to expound on that idea? And he's like, not really. We can fit it in somehow. And they're like, okay, Dave. And I really liked how it turned out. It was fun. One of the reasons I found it so fun was the notable guest appearances in this episode. Most notably, I feel like, is Ben Schwartz of kind of Parks and Rec fame. A lot of people know him as John Ralphio from that show. But then in the animation world, a lot of other people will know him as Dewey from the DuckTales reboot from 2017. Of course, I think he was Leonardo in the most recent Ninja Turtles cartoon. Then he was also, what was the name of that show? Because when I made this connection, it blew my mind. It was another Disney XD show. Randy Cunningham's Ninth Grade Ninja. That's what it was. I never watched that show, which is why I have trouble remembering the title. But I remember when I looked up his IMDb, I'm like, holy cow, he was the main character in that show. I had no clue. And so he just pops, and of course he's the voice of Sonic in the live action Sonic the Hedgehog movies with Jim Carrey. So he gets around, and he has a penchant for voicing characters that have a blue color scheme to them. Of course, Dewey. If it was Leonardo, that's who he was in the Ninja Turtles cartoon. Then that's the blue Ninja Turtle. And then of course now Teo, who had kind of the teal on him, which is a shade of blue, so it counts. So you have the trifecta of Well, no, it's a quad factor because of course Sonic the Hedgehog, he's blue famously. So I mean, but that's a movie. This is TV, so it's like so you have your now trifecta of blue animated TV characters he's played plus Sonic the Hedgehog. So I just find him very funny whenever he pops up in something. Um, so it's I just in his he just very charismatic, really good voice work. So him showing up as Teo worked really well. And the fun thing is that since he played a droid, and they had like a modulator filter on his voice, he could actually come back as another character in the future, in animation or live action, and come back to Star Wars and do something totally different, which is the fun thing about voice acting, is that you can voice multiple characters as long as you kind of change things up a little bit, and sometimes not even really change things up a little bit. um, but so yeah, it was really fun to have him there, and I thought his last words were just very funny. It's like Teo regrets nothing and loses power. Although I don't know, I enjoyed his character so much, and I'm presuming he's dead at this point after he was fixed the first time. But I don't know. Maybe he just lost power and they didn't have time to fix him in that moment. If the next episode starts and he's just like they're serving drinks with AZ3 at Sid's bar, I will I will clap and cheer. It's like that would honestly be really really funny. Is if there's now a running gag in Bad Batch where they encounter various different droids and they end up kind of adopting them and taking them back with them to serve drinks at Sid's bar because she doesn't seem to have any other employees, and you don't have to pay droids. so if Teo does indeed come back, and kind of gets like a little humbling lesson from getting blown up a couple times in this episode, then I'm all for that. I'm up for more Ben Schwartz and Star Wars. But if this is all his one appearance was, it's like, hey, I appreciated it. That was cool to see him in there, and I think the character that they chose for him worked really well. That reaction of oh my gosh, where's my arms and legs was so funny. I busted it laughing out loud. It was so good. So yeah, that Teo. Then there was the other guy, the big kind of crime boss, whose name I never really got. It took me a while to place his voice. I'm like, I know I have heard that voice before. Where is it from? And then the credits rolled. I'm like, oh shoot, it was Ernie Hudson. Most people probably know him from Ghostbusters, but I know him more from Transformers Prime. He was Agent Fowler in that show. I was like, oh, it's Agent Fowler. How you doing, man? So and he pops up now and then doing different voices because he's done a lot of voice work in the past. So yeah, it was really cool to see him pop up and hear his voice because he's got a really nice voice. So and I don't know. At first, it seemed like he was just a straight up bad guy, but I don't know. It seems he's almost kind of like Hondo, where it's like, yeah, he's a liar and a cheat, but he's also got this weird code of honor as well, where it's like that one pod racer was like very upset that Tech beat him, so he goes and reaches for his blaster to kind of shoot him as they're walking out the door, and he stops him. It's like, no, our business is concluded. Don't be making this personal. So it's like I kind of liked that. And I'm interested to see if we'll see him again because there's a lot of these kind of one-off characters that they throw in for like one episode, and it does, and some of them are definitely, well, that's not a one-off character. They're probably going to show up again, and then they have. But then there's others where they really are just, yeah, they show up, they disappear, and you never see them again, which granted, Clone Wars did a lot too. The only thing with Clone Wars, though, is that oftentimes they would show up and disappear because they were killed off in the same episode they were introduced in, especially in the early seasons. They got one, maybe two episodes, and then they got axed off. And sometimes they were originally supposed to be in one episode, and then they made another episode and put in that aired later but was earlier in the timeline or something like that. Tal Merrick from season 2 of Clone Wars. He was supposed to only be in that one episode he was in, Voyage of Temptation. But then they decided that they needed an episode to go before it to kind of set up the Mandalorian plot and everything. So then they made that first episode with Obi-Wan investigating things on Concordia with Satine and meeting Pre Vizsla and all that. And so he kind of had a very small role there in Satine's throne room. So Got it. So then just by happenstance, by luck, he ends up surviving for more than one episode, but not by much. Um, so yeah, I'll be very interested to see if this crime lord guy comes back, especially considering he has ties to Sid's past. I'm gonna say it's probably a pretty good guess to say that we'll see more of him. Um, so yeah, so I'll be looking forward to that as the season progresses. As for the batch themselves, still some good. This was a lighter, and where to it's like, oh, this is all filler, blah 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 blah. I can see where people think that, but from this episode, because it's like there wasn't any like major character development or really a moral or a lesson they learned or whatever. Really, in this episode, it really was just kind of Tech proving himself on the race course, and it's like, I don't know, maybe they could have done something a little bit extra where it's like maybe he was doubting himself after the Sereno incident or something, and he needed to prove his worth because his leg is miraculously healed. He wasn't limping at all or anything, so it's like, obviously enough time has passed since Sereno to where his leg is better. And then Wrecker is really just Wrecker in this episode. If anything, while Tech was mainly the focus, I feel like maybe Omega was the one that actually had a little bit of development in this episode, since she's showing that she's she still is, but she's not as naive as she was in the very early episode. She's got a little bit more worldly knowledge to her now, and like the, oh hey, it's like, yeah, and standing up for Sid and everything, because she and Sid kind of bonded in that one episode in season 1. So it's like that. So having that loyalty to Sid and everything, and standing up for her, and like and trying to barter with the crime boss and everything. It's like that's definitely season 1, episode 3. Omega definitely would not have done that, because in season 1, episode 3, I'm pretty sure that's when she's getting chased on Pandora by Fennec Shand. So that was definitely a much more vulnerable Omega. This is Omega now is learned a lot and can definitely hold her own a little bit more. So that's really cool to see, and I think this episode was a good example of that. And I do just kind of find it funny that that last week, Crosshair and Commander Cody go on this really harrowing mission. It's like lots of soldiers die. There's explosions. They're fighting battle droids. There's this really serious moral quandary at the core of the episode and what it's about and everything. The episode ends on this really melancholy note, and you don't even get the triumphant end credits. It just cuts to the credits, and they flash by as somber music plays. And then at probably roughly the same time in the timeline, it's like, oh boy, let's go do pod racing with Tech, Wrecker, and Echo. Woo wee, let's have fun. It's in the end of the episode. You get to the end of the episode. Dun 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 dun. So I do really find that just juxtaposition between the two groups of the batch now, where where it's like Crosshair is kind of in a bad situation, sort of kind of his own making. Meanwhile, the Bad Batch is in this bad situation where they're kind of hiding from the Empire and trying to make ends meet, and almost living paycheck to paycheck and just whatever credit Sid will give them, but they still have time for these kind of wacky, fun adventures. And it's like, because this was, people died in this episode, so it's not like it didn't have its dark moments. But this still was a pretty light adventure, all things considered. It felt like kind of a more refined version of a early season 1 episode of Clone Wars, or like this could even be something that I don't think would have felt out of place in season 1 and 2 of Rebels either. And it's definitely, and it's this, and this type of episode right here is, I feel like, what Star Wars Resistance was trying to be a lot, because I feel like even in just the one episode that this crime boss and everything is presented, I feel like they gave him more depth in this one episode and kind of did a better job portraying him in just this one episode he's been in so far than like Captain Kragan or any of his pirate crew, except for Sonara and all of Star Wars Resistance. but it's like, of course, Kragan was supposed to be a straight up bad guy and not really have too much depth to him or anything. But even then, maybe I'm selling I'm selling that character specifically too short. I feel like because Captain Kragan in Resistance actually did have a little bit of nuance to him. It wasn't much, but he was still a bad guy at the end of the day. But it's like he came back to kind of save the Colossus because it was in his best interest because the First Order would have wiped him out. So he kind of begrudgingly teamed up with the Colossus crew for a while and everything. But I feel like the overall mature tone that Bad Batch and Clone Wars share overall helps these lighter episodes because you can get this lighter episode and still have some fun, but then it still feels like that. It's like, yeah, we're progressing something here, and there's more obvious nuance to these characters. Where Resistance really does feel like a baby show, unfortunately, even when even when and especially when it's trying to do something darker. So there's my little mini review of Star Wars Resistance in case any of you were curious what I thought of that show, because I haven't really talked about it too much. So yeah. So what else to say about this episode? Oh, I liked and again, going to it has kind of this dark tinge to it despite being a lighter episode. At one point those laser blasts gets thrown to the audience and everyone ducks and they're like, "Oh, we're okay." And then the camera kind of pans over and that one guy just falls over because he's got a hole in his chest. And then you hear the announcer go, "Oh, it's like it seems that some laser bolts have flown into the crowds. We remind all the spectators that blah 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 resort or whatever is not liable for any death, injury, or mutilation you may encounter while staying at our complex or whatever." It's like, okay, that's funny. I like that kind of dry satire that would not honestly feel out of place at Disney World. It's like if Disney World were just a little more intense. Sorry. If it was just a little more intense, I could totally imagine you go to like the Star Wars section and they have like a Geonosian arena and where it's like they got a tiger dressed up like a Nexu and the tiger gets loose and it eats a kid or something and then like they have some voice announcer come on. It's like, Disney World is not responsible for any death, mutilation, or injury you may encounter while staying at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So there's my getting Palpatine roped into my Bad Batch review. So yeah, I don't really think I have too much else to say at this point. I mean, it's a pretty simple episode. I think I've probably stretched this longer than I thought I could because of the kind of simple subject matter. But yeah, so next week is going to be, or excuse me, this week, because yeah, I record these later and put them up days before the new episode. This episode this week is going to be called Entombed, so I'm interested to see what that entails. That definitely feels like it's going to have an Indiana Jones adventure vibe or something to go with it. So I'll be looking forward to that, and I will see you guys a week from now in my review for that episode. So thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.